Is Premodern the new legacy? Is it worth it to buy any card for Premodern if you can just proxy it into the ground? About this and much, much more in today's episode about Premodern. First off, what is Premodern? So this is a format which basically uses old cards with old frame, and the card legality is from 1995, 4th edition, up until 2003 Scourge. And it stops right before a new frame was introduced in the 8th edition. It was actually a grassroots format introduced by Martin Berlin in 2012 with no Wizards involvement. It was just a fan-made format with the intention of just, using the cards you may already have and you feel some nostalgia for. You can relive some experiences and some decks. And what's actually fascinating is that it is a closed format because it stops in 2003, and so no new cards are added by definition. And even though it's a closed format, the meta decks change over time, and people play different decks and try to kind of readjust to what's happening within that closed pool. So in theory, you could break it by finding the best deck, but actually it's just theory because it just kind of doesn't happen. It also does have a ban list, so there are some things being adjusted here and there with bans and also unbans. But for all intents and purposes, it's a time capsule. Now, why did it get so popular is the question. Well, there are a couple of things. And those things boil down to the issues of Magic nowadays, because one could argue the biggest boom of Premodern is right now and has been for the couple of months / years, because one, Universes Beyond. I've talked about this on this channel quite a bit. Universes Beyond universally kills off enthusiasm in a lot of spaces. People don't want to see Spider-Mans and pizzas of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on their cards, and this time capsule insulates the format from these things. Second thing is power creep. The cards, the Modern Horizon sets, the cards are much, much better with time. They do so much more. A single card does this and that, snowballs. Well, in the past, you had much better answers, Swords to Plowshares, Hydroblasts of the world, and much weaker creatures. And it's much like if you actually get up to cards, it matters so much more in Premodern than in, for example, Modern. No, it's irrelevant. You could start at 9 cards, doesn't matter, because every single card is so powerful that card advantage also vanishes as a concept. And the third thing is the generation that did play 1997, 2003. Now with adult money, proper adult money. But also with the stability, because, you've got family, job, you can't really keep up with all the changes with every set, especially with a set every 2 months nowadays, which is a separate issue. You can build a deck, or preferably even rebuild the deck you already had in the past, which you love, and then you can just keep it, whether it's Mono Red Goblins, Sly, or Blue-Green Madness. You just play this deck, you can pimp it out as much as you want, and just roll with it. And the same thing can be done for other people. So, doesn't rotate, doesn't have any Spider-Mans in it, doesn't get power crept, and you can invest as much or as little time into it as you personally desire. The topic of card legality now comes up. If you do play with the cards literally printed in the designated time frame, of course they're perfectly legal. But given the stress on kind of the time capsulility of the format, what if you play, let's say, Shivan Reef, a Painland that has been reprinted into the dirt, especially in a new frame, even though there is one original in the old frame? Well, it's allowed to play a new frame Shivan Reef, although it might be frowned upon sometimes, or rather, it is preferred to keep the spirit of the format with the older frames, not new frame foil alternative arts. There are also golden frames, because back in the day, we used to have World Championship decks, a product released with kind of replicas of the decks used at the highest stage, which, by the way, I think that's an excellent idea of a product, and I'm really sad we don't have that now, which you could have acquired with the caveat that because of the golden frame and a custom back, you couldn't play them in sanctioned tournaments. They weren't actually legal. Now, in pre-modern tournaments, under some jurisdictions of some tournament organizers, you can play those cards, which to me actually gives even a better feel, a very unique feel of those older times where we had those products, but also is just much more affordable if you want to build a deck. Because, for example, Gaea's Cradle will cost you, $1.5K, while the golden frame will cost you not even 100. Right? That's a huge difference. When you go to other cards, from the resolvers, especially, right? Mox Diamond will cost you almost $1,000, and the older frame will like 50. So when they are allowed, you're much more incentivized to buy the golden frames because they're much, much more affordable while still looking great and, being in theme with everything else. But there's also the third aspect, which is proxies. And now most local grassroots initiatives will allow proxies because, and that's a kind of classic situation for both local play, but also when you try to get new people into something. If you allow them to proxy, it's much easier to get them into the game because they can proxy the decks, or you can proxy out a couple of decks and then lend them to people so they can actually play with you not worrying about what happens to the deck because you just proxied it. It's a great way to generate hype and pump up players because they can participate actually. If you force them to buy those reserved list cards, well, they won't really participate, will they? Right? And so proxies are a very popular way for people to participate in this. However, it does pose some risks for people who would rather speculate or invest thinking of Premodern because of that proxy scene. And again, this format is still very firmly grassroots. It has tournaments like, European Championships. So it is actually gathering bigger and bigger audiences. You can see tournaments, that are like for 100 or 200 people. This definitely changes quite a bit. Now, I will say that one of the more interesting developments is actually officially introducing Premodern on MTGO. And so you now, for the last couple of weeks, months-ish, you can play Premodern on Modo and look at Modo results. And although everybody says it's actually different than paper, people play different decks, you can actually play it on an official platform, which is even more interesting. A curious aspect to all of this is the financial matters when it comes to old Premodern cards that have been reprinted, like the example of Chivalry I gave previously. And cards that are old are much more expensive in their old version than the new version. For example, Terravore. If you want to buy the original Odyssey version, you would have to pay, $10 to $12. But the reprinted version from Dominaria costs you like $1. That's 10x the price. And if you wanted to go for the Odyssey foil, that would command you $70. That's a huge difference. If you prefer old frames, you sometimes have to pay tenfold the price. And why is that? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One, aesthetics. We talked about this a couple of times. An older frame is more in line with the spirit of the format, and so it's a bit more coveted. And same like with everything, some people play better basics because they prefer better basics to the new frame of Ixalan basics, right? Some people prefer vinyl, and that's how they listen to music rather than Spotify, even though the outcome is the same because you listen to that album. A second thing is that old foils are literally different. For the case of foils specifically, the curling is different. If you compare a foil nowadays, it's such a Pringle, it's basically tournament illegal. And older foils are absolutely excellent and in quality, and a lot of people can attest to that. And the third thing is that you cannot reprint it more, so to speak. Like if you prefer, if you reprint that Chivalry or that Terravore again, it will be the reprinted version, not the original version. Like being the original inherently makes it original. There aren't more. There is some number of original Terravores in the pool and then in circulation, and there can't be more. And this absolutely affects, the way we view scarcity. And so it is there is some aspect of demand and supply here, definitely. And so this is a very interesting kind of investment aspect. You could buy the new Shivan Reefs, for example, or you could buy the old ones, and you could have your full deck old frame foil, potentially, right? Or new frame non-foil, and that will be such a vast difference in price. It's absolutely unbelievable. So now let's get into the shoes of maybe someone who doesn't want to play the format actively, but is more thinking about maybe investing, thinking about the format. And so there are a couple of upsides. The upside is there is the presence of the reserved list, as in if you acquire some of the cards, they will stay unprintable in the state that they are. So that is nice. On top of that, there are cards that are played in a lot of formats. So you have like Gaea's Cradle, which would be played in Premodern, but also Legacy and Vintage and variants of Commander. So that they definitely boost that. On top of that, we've got demand that's ever increasing, when those so-called dinosaurs are coming back to the format or discovering the format, and the pool just increases using the same kind of player base that they used to play it. And on top of that, a lot of cards are purely great as collectibles, especially those old foils. Now, there are some issues on the other side of the coin, because one, Premodern is still pretty niche. When I mentioned like the European Championships, well, we see 100, 200 people, which is great, but that's far, far from something like Commander, which is millions of players, or even Pauper, which has, Pauper Games, where 1,000 people attend. So Premodern is still in the beginning stages. On top of that, there is no official support from Wizards, which also changes the way we look at it. When it's in unofficial, it loses a bit of prestige. There's also the proxy culture. So, you could buy out Gaea's Cradles, but if people just proxy them, and then what can you do about this? A barrier for the people where the demand could be might just look at this financial barrier of entry with, for example, those Gaea's Cradles, like who will fork out over $1,000 to play, a 12-person FNM, right? There is the barrier of entry is very, very high. And so there are upsides and downsides from a person perspective if they're a collector, for example. But now, tell me what you think. I want to know, have you ever played Premodern? Have you ever bought cards for Premodern? Or maybe you play Legacy and you happen to have cards for Premodern. What do you think of this whole idea of having black borders specifically and not using reprints? Tell us in the comments down below. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Cheers.